Welcome to the Association 4.0 podcast, your association's no-fluff playbook to navigating and thriving in Industry 4.0 or the digital marketplace. Each week, we bring expert insights to help you and your association stay ahead of the curve.
Hello, my name is Sherry Budziak, and I'm the host of the Association 4.0 podcast. I'm also the founder of .org Community and the CEO of .org Source, a consultancy to associations. Today, my guest is the Irishman Speaks Conor Cunneen. Conor is the authority on employee relations, leadership development, change management, customer service, and team building. In addition to frequently educating audiences on these topics, he also entertains them with a great sense of humor and a terrific Irish accent. So welcome, Conor. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Hey, Sherry, and I'm coming in with that Irish accent. I've actually been working on my Chicago accent for 22 years now, but I haven't clinched it yet.
Not yet. We'll work on that.
Yeah.
So tell me about the Irishman Speaks and your background.
Right. Well, it's Irishman Speaks is the brand. And just to tell you where I actually am right now, I am a keynote speaker and a consultant whose mission is to improve people, performance, and productivity with a smile. And in doing that, I speak to associations and corporations to basically leave people with that smile in the face, a spring in the step, and some good actionable takeaways to improve performance or productivity. How did I get here? I came over about 23 years ago as VP of Marketing with a company called Best Foods Mayonnaise, Hellman's Mayonnaise. You would know them, particularly their brands. And after a few years, when we were taken over by Unilever, stayed with them for a few years, and then we kind of went our separate ways. And since then, I have been working in keynoting, consulting, facilitating, and over the years, from being just a pure food service consultant, I morphed into Irishman Speaks, improving people, performance, and productivity with a smile.
That's so fun. I know you've spoken at a couple of our conferences. We love having you and always have a smile when you're at our events. So I'm really excited to talk with you today. So what has captured your attention lately in the association world?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I think it's the continuing uncertainty, Sherry. I mean, we thought we were out of COVID, then monkeypox is starting to rear its head. But then the other thing I think that's really frightening people a little bit right now is that even though we're going to events, and most of them, the protocols are reasonably okay. In the southern states, obviously, there's no mask wearing at all. But I think the really frightening thing right now is the level of inflation in travel and entertainment and things like that. So, I mean, you know, as well as I do probably, that, I mean, the flights from Chicago down to, let's say, Orlando or over to San Diego are more than twice what they were in January. I'm doing an event for the New England Society of Association Executives in a couple of weeks' time. And originally that was supposed to happen in January of this year. Didn't happen. I had booked flights. I'm now looking at rebooking. Well, I've rebooked the flights again. They're about 250% more than they were in January. And I think a lot of members of associations are really looking at, wow, can I justify paying $350 for a hotel room that should be maybe $170 or something like that? Can I justify paying $900 to go down to Houston when last year it might have been only $350 or $450 kind of thing?
Yeah, that is making it really tough for folks to consider, as you said, flying and traveling to a meeting, especially with the uncertainty and then having that added expense, which is a big challenge. So you're right. So we've kind of continued to navigate all of these things that are happening in our world, right? So from the association standpoint.
Yeah, and I think what's happening is that the companies that might have been sending 7 or 8 people to an event previously, that were dropping it down to maybe 5 or 6, or if the 7 or 8 go to this event, well, you're not going to the next event that you normally go. So I think it has real potential to reduce numbers by 10-15% for some of the larger conferences.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, Connor, you often advise leaders to remember the importance of the easy things that they might take for granted, such as giving a compliment or saying thank you. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Right. Well, when I'm speaking to organizations and associations, Sherry, my basic mantra is that most leaders and most managers cannot substantially improve their employees' net worth.
Mm-hmm.
They can substantially improve their self-worth. So you can't improve net worth significantly, you can improve self-worth significantly. And basically, at the end of the day, when someone is going home, they're not thinking how much I got paid for the today's work. They know what that salary is, etc. And it just kind of becomes passé after a while. I do think if you can have your employees going home saying, hey, I was appreciated today, I was valued today, I was recognized by my peers or by my boss or customers or something like that. That is actually what motivates me to come into work tomorrow. And that's basically what I mean about self-worth and appreciating and recognizing your colleagues, your team, customers, vendors, everyone that you're actually in touch with.
Yeah, I think as everybody gets busy, especially for leaders, they forget about that. I know that I do. And, really being intentional of taking a pause to show that appreciation is really important. I received a call this morning from a customer of ours who was not feeling appreciated to the point where they're actually going to be leaving the organization. And it has nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with title. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has everything to do with feeling unappreciated.
Yeah, and she's not, he or she is not the only person that'll be doing that today. And I think basically, people talk about the great resignation, Sherry, but I actually think it's the great job change. The vast majority of people that are resigning to go to somewhere else. And they're going to somewhere else because, well, they might think they're getting a better salary, but that doesn't appear to be the case in most instances. It's they believe that they're going to get a better recognition, better job satisfaction, more appreciated, better work-life balance, etc. And the dollars, they are important. I'm not saying they're not, but ultimately, whether you're enjoying your job has really very little to do with the dollars you're taking home, as long as you're getting a reasonably fair salary.
Yeah, I've been talking to folks about that because I've always said it's not necessarily the salary, and people will say, well, Sherry, they got 30% more than what we were paying them. I'm like, yeah, but maybe they wouldn't have been looking, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we change a culture? And I did a podcast with Jamie Nodder on culture, and that was kind of a big discussion too. Like, what is your culture and how people will, stay around because of a good culture. But with that said, when we're interacting with our members, what are the strategies to ensure a great customer experience?
I think this goes back to having a very clear idea. I use the phrase, I may have used it at one of your previous conferences, what do we want to be famous for? Okay, so people spend days off at vision meetings, and we got whiteboards, and we got blackboards, and we got more whiteboards, etc. We go playing golf, and we come back to more whiteboards again, and there's post-it notes all over the place. I think a basic question that will really get people to the point is, what do we want to be famous for? I.e., what is it within our business sphere we want people to say about us when we're not in the room, kind of thing. And if we know that we want to create we want people to say, wow, that association provides a great member experience. Now, what does that mean? And if you can look at, then identify maybe some avatars of members and identify the various kind of interactions and experiences that they have got and are getting, and try and audit them objectively, which is not easy. I think that is the way you actually start looking at it. But ultimately, and also goes back, Sherry, I think to, I think a lot of companies talk about customer experience and member experience, etc. And they talk about once every 3 months or something like that. I think the customer experience, the member experience should be on every single meeting agenda for leaders, and anecdotes and illustrations of of what has been happening in terms of customer experience and member experience. I don't necessarily mean that we go and do a 1,500 member questionnaire and then we look at the results of the questionnaire and say we got to do this. I think you got to talk about it in qualitative terms and anecdotal terms, so that it just gets stuck into the mind every single time we're talking about member experience, and then we start paying attention on a daily basis to the member experience.
So that's a really good advice. How do you think the pandemic changed the way that leaders should think about employee engagement?
I could be cynical and say that it hasn't changed the way they think about employee engagement for a lot of leaders. What I would say is they're thinking about employee engagement for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely has become a major issue. I think there are organizations that over the years have done a fantastic job in trying to cultivate a great member or association or employee experience. I mean, Richard Branson is probably famous for it. Poor Tony Shea with Zappos, I mean, he tried to create a great member experience as well, and they really invested in that. But it wasn't a universal kind of mantra prior to COVID. Since COVID, it obviously has become a major one. And I think now what people have got to do is that they've got to decide, and decide is the important wording. They've got to decide that on a daily basis, we're going to do deliberate, intentional, consistent activities to make sure our employees are engaged. And if the CEO and the chief marketing officer or others keep talking about the employee engagement at their presentations, which they will, but they don't do anything on the Monday to Thursday before that presentation, they're wasting their time. It has to be deliberate, intentional, and consistent.
So on a kind of a different note, I had mentioned about, I get calls from people who are aggravated potentially with their supervisor, or not very engaged because of various reasons. So I guess when an employee has a challenge with a supervisor, what can they do to keep themselves positive and really improve the situation?
Oh, you don't ask easy questions, do you? I've done quite a bit of desk research on this over the years, Sherry, and so much of the advice on it, I think honestly, is quite trite. Advice like, well, try and appreciate what the boss or the manager's mindset is, etc. That's important. Try and kind of visualize what they're really looking for. If it's a micromanager, which is probably the biggest pain in the proverbial for anyone, I saw one person saying, try and anticipate what they're going to be looking for before they actually try to micromanage you. That isn't how micromanagers are going to be adopted or changed. And the problem is that there's an imbalance. I mean, the theory is we should be able to have a conversation and express my concern that you're not being fair to me. But you've got the imbalance of a superior and a subordinate kind of thing. But at the same time, though, I do think that simple little things might make a difference. Do you know anything about your boss outside of the work environment? Do they have hobbies, family, kids, cats? Are they involved with some association or organization, etc., hobby that you could possibly have a conversation with them on that? So you're trying to get away from the pure work environment. And if you can start doing things like that and somehow or another create a way to engage in just general conversation rather than, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, etc. And you're going, yes, yes, yes. The more you can get a conversation going, which I'm not saying is easy, I think that is what was the best way. And that's what I suggest to people. And it works sometimes, and it doesn't work other times. The other option is that in some of the better managed organizations that do offer 360 feedback, etc., that do allow you to go up over your current supervisor, etc., and make complaints. But a lot of companies, even if they have that in place, I'm not sure what action they take at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's I've been talking to folks about this remote work environment too. And I think in a lot of cases, people have lost some of that human connection, not just because of being behind a screen, as we're going from meeting to meeting to task to task.
Yeah.
We're not spending the time passing in the hall saying, hey, Connor, how was your weekend? That was great. Like, we're getting to the meeting. Here's a meeting agenda and move on. And for those, so I think it is important as you talk about, you know, learning about somebody or opening up a conversation about things that are going on in their personal lives. So you have more of a connected relationship, even if you're behind the screen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the clients I'm working at the moment, they're in food manufacturing. I'm doing a lot of employee engagement work with this client, and they have a large number of supervisors. They're based in a number of different states around the country. So in the programs I'm doing with them, we might have maybe 8 to 11, 12 supervisors in at any of the particular sessions. The first thing I ask people to do is to give us one piece of, tell us one thing about you that the rest of the room would not know. And it is absolutely amazing how people open up. The first couple of people might be just very, very shy and say, I've got, I don't know. And that's one of the answers you might get some of the time. Yeah. But the next person then will say, well, I've got a 2-year-old grandkid and she's the apple of my eye. Then someone else might say from across the other side of the room, hey, I've got 3 grandkids at this stage. Aren't they brilliant? That kind of thing. But what it does is it allows a conversation to start. But what it also does show, Sherry, is that the vast majority of people, when they're working in either fast-paced environments like that food manufacturing, or actually when we're on these Zoom calls, that we know nothing, as we might say back in Ireland. We know nothing about the people who are in the room. And if you can, I'm not saying we do it every call, but if you can find some way again to get to know the people in the room just a little bit better, before the meeting starts, it'll take 5 minutes probably for that to happen. I think you will get more engagement, more interaction, and better, where people will start appreciating you again more, and you're creating more of a family feel without going totally kind of goofy-eyed about the whole thing.
Yeah. So a different question for you. What role does technology play in employee engagement and the office culture?
Well, I suppose there's 2 ways of looking at this. I mean, we're doing this Zoom call, and in a lot of ways, Zoom, I mean, I really enjoy doing Zoom calls, but I know a lot of people don't enjoy doing Zoom calls. The challenge that we've got when doing business presentations on Zoom is that the vast majority of people who are on the call don't show on video. And I can appreciate that. I kind of just visualize what they're like, and I still have good fun and good engagement with them. I keep calling out for ideas, etc. But it does impact the productivity of the productivity and the learning of the meeting, because you know, and I know. Now, I would if I'm on a call taking some just on the other end of the call, you and we would never be multitasking with the video off. We're the only 2 people in the world that would never be doing that. Okay, right. What are you laughing at? Are you? You mean you would multitask with the video off? But the problem with that is, as we all know, is that we're not paying serious attention to what is being said on the other side of the call. So it can be a challenge. I do think that if you've got corporate meetings, unless there's a good reason, you should be asking your team to show on video. When webinars and things like that are different, but if you've got a regular weekly meeting or whatever it is, and those people before COVID turned up at the meeting, I think the expectation is that they turn up at the meeting right now. And you may have a little bit of kickback. You may have had a little bit of kickback initially, but I think after weeks 2, 3, or 4, people forget that they're on the camera again.
Yeah, I totally agree. So kind of, you interact with a variety of organizations and leaders, from corporate to associations, nonprofits, and I'd love to hear what you feel is what's your most important advice that you can give them at this time. Right.
I'll go back to what I said earlier, Sherry. for most managers and leaders, unless you're an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos, you cannot significantly improve your employees' net worth. You can significantly improve their self-worth. And I think the employer or the leader or the manager who makes deliberate efforts to make sure that their team is appreciated, is valued, is one who's going to get the best productivity, who's going to get the best response from that team. Now, it does not mean that you kind of just pat them on the head every morning and say, nice doggy kind of thing. I mean, you've got expectations for your team. But the thing is, if you are seen to be treating your team fairly, I think when you're doing that, you can also call them out when there are issues. And this is one of the things that I talk about in my program. I've got a concept, I think you have heard it, which is based on just 5 micro goals I encourage people to do on a daily basis, if possible. That spells the acronym CHAPS, CHAPS. And the first one, it depends how much time we've got, but I'll give you 2 of them. The first one, C, is for compliment. And you know that if someone compliments you, you feel better about yourself. I know that if someone compliments me, I go to yoga at 5:30 every Wednesday morning. Sure.
That's early. Good for you.
Early, boy, I'm spent for the rest of the day, okay? But there's only 6 of us in the class. One of the reasons why I keep going to that class is because the yoga teacher is brilliant. She consistently, I mean, I've got the flexibility of a plank, okay? But in each class, though, she will at least say one thing to me. She's positive to me. She might even say something like, whoa, Conor, you're still standing. But I mean, but seriously, she just every one of the person in the room gets at least 1 or 2 compliments each time, and makes you feel kind of, again, appreciated. And you know, I'll go back because the next vibe is going to be good as well. The other, so I do say this CHAPS concept, find reasons to compliment your team. People say to me, Conor, I can't always find ways to compliment my team. And I kind of wonder whether you're the problem then or the team is the problem. But what I do say to people in this situation is that, let's say, the weekly meeting, and this I think should be on the agenda for each weekly meeting. The question is, what did we do well in the last week? Because what tends to happen at all these meetings is all we do is we kind of just moan and identify all the problems, etc. I think if you've got a specific content in that agenda, what did we do well in the last week? Then you as a leader, when Mary Lou or Billy Joe mentions what he or she did well, you can actually compliment them in front of the rest of the room and say kudos, well done, etc. So even if you're not sure what they did do well before they come into the room, if you ask the question, and it's a powerful question that will get conversation going, and the more you get and ask that question, the easier it is to be getting examples from people. And what you're then doing is you're going back to one of your questions earlier about the member experience. So if you're an association, what did we do well in the last week? Someone in the finance or something that might give X, Y, or Z or something, they're called out. What it's doing is it's reinforcing the need for a good member experience, etc.
That's a great tip.
That would be the first element of the CHAPS concept that I speak to. The second is about hear, thank you. A is about addressing people with their name. P is using positive words or phrases with people. And S is about putting a smile in people's face. But if, depending on what time we've got, I'd just like to go to A for a moment, which is A for addressing people with their name. And it really has intrigued me over the last couple of years as I've been doing Zoom calls, and then we've been working on site in the last maybe 4 or 5 months. One of the things I try to do is I talk about the importance of addressing people with their name, because you're making a real connection then, Sherry, with them. But what I do, and just one way to illustrate this is that, let's say I've got that client I mentioned earlier where it might have 8 or 12 people in the room. When they come into the room, I'll make sure I greet them personally, get their name, put their name down on a piece of paper on a map I've got in front of me, so I know where Sherry is, I know where Kevin is, I know where Conor is, I know where Lourdes is, etc. in the room. And then throughout the session, I'll say, and Sherry, what do you think? And Kevin, what do you think, etc. And Lourdes, what do you think, etc. And people come up to me afterwards and they say, all right, Conor, I love your concept of CHAPS. That thing about addressing people with their name, I really get it. but how did you remember all of our names? I mean, I was amazed that you actually called me out and called me out by name. That hasn't happened once. That hasn't happened twice. It's happened numerous times. And I've got this trick of just writing the names down on a map. But what people are appreciating is that I've called them out by name. And that's one of the things I say to people in organizations. Address people with their name, address your members with their name when you're on phone calls with them, address your vendors with their name, etc. And it makes a real difference to how people are connecting with the other person in the conversation.
That's a great tip, Conor. So as we wrap up today, I want to kind of go back to, I love your idea or concept of what do I want to be famous for? Right. So explain to me how you came up with that idea. Let's just kind of wrap up on that thought.
Oh, I really am not sure how I came up with it. I mean, I spent a lot of time on trying to understand visioning and teach visioning and where do we want to go from here, etc. And sometimes when I read textbooks or just see some other organizations, the way they do all this vision stuff, it is. I mean, I could expand a program for 4 days on vision. But at the end of the day, I actually think that the question, what do I want to be famous for? And we spend a few hours thinking about that, will actually get us almost to the same place as if IBM or Dell or someone does their 4-day vision statement. Where did it come from? I'm not 100% sure where it actually originated from originally, but it is kind of unique. It's simple. And what I actually say is not just, so what I say is that if you as an executive, CEO of your organization, I mean, if you answer the question, what do I want to be famous for? You and Kevin answer that question. I think it'll help you to craft your programming even better. But then if you take just a regular member of who's doing administrative work in an association, and you ask them, what do I want to be famous for within my association? So I want to be famous for being, let's say, proactive, accurate, resourceful, something like that. And then I encourage people to just pay attention to the words you've written down. I actually say to them, take some of these words and just write them down and put them in with your driver's license. So that when you go home at the end of the day, will someone take out my driver's license? Will Kevin, Sherry, Conor use any of those 3 words to describe me today? So it's a powerful question. It works. I mean, what I like to try and do, Sherry, is to leave people. I rarely use PowerPoint, but what I do like to do is I like to leave people with pictures in the mind, and then the kind of mental triggers to help them to remember those pictures. And the mental trigger for what do I want to be famous for is just putting a few words into your wallet or driving license, so that when you get to the gas station or the next airport, TSA, etc., you'll take them out and you'll say, I've got some work to do on this activity. So
that's fantastic. Well, thanks, Conor, for all your great advice. I always love talking to you and hearing your insights. And thanks to our listeners today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And Conor, if somebody is interested in engaging you to help with their culture or employee engagement, or actually you're a great keynote speaker, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, a few ways. They can contact Sherry at our community, and she will give her the details. And I know a very good testimonial as well. Thank you for that previously. The brand is Irishman Speaks. Website is Irishman Speaks. My email is cc, that easy, cc@irishmanspeaks.com. And I'd love to help people to continue to grow their employee engagement or speak at the conferences, obviously, as well.
Fantastic. So to meet leaders like Conor, consider joining .org Community. .org Community connects you with a vibrant network of association executives and partners. You can learn more about us at www.orgcommunity.com. So thanks so much for joining us today, and hope to see everyone soon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and discovered tips and information that will add value to your leadership style and your association. .org Source specializes in positioning teams for success with solutions for technology, strategy, and marketing. Please contact us at info@orgsource.com or visit www.orgsource.com to find out how to keep your organization on track to Association 4.0.